Hello and welcome back to the Measure Pod. Listeners will probably remember me. I'm Dara. I'm back in the hosting chair after a bit of a break from the Measure Pod, but I'm back now with a new host, my co-host Matthew Hewson. So, firstly, Matthew, welcome to the hosting chair on the Measure Pod.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. So I mentioned in the what would have been our last episode that we were mixing up the format a little bit, shaking the bag. So we were going to be joining as the new co-hosts, and we might change the format a little bit, which I guess we can maybe cover off today a little bit. Although this might be a slightly different. This will probably be a slightly different format to what's going to follow because obviously we're introducing ourselves, or I'm reintroducing myself. And then we might start. It'll kind of start to settle into a new format, probably from the next one. The other thing is we've got quite a big topic to cover off today, so we probably need as much time for that as we can possibly give ourselves.
Yeah, we thought we'd have a nice, easy start with Next 25, and then Google reinvented BigQuery pretty much. So that's not giving us a huge amount of wiggle room.
And that's just BigQuery.
Yeah,
We're probably not even going to get to touch on any of the other updates, but we'll see how we go. But anyway, little quick reintro. So as I've said already, I'm Dara. Listeners will probably know me, unless you're newer listeners and you're thinking, who's this guy? I used to be on the Measure Pod back in the day, and now I've returned. It's my triumphant. Well, that's a bit ambitious, actually. We'll see.
what happens.
We'll see how it goes. But it's my return, whether it's triumphant or not, we don't know yet. Matthew, do you want to give yourself a little bit of an intro?
Yes, I am Matthew Hewson, to chuck my second name in there as well for officialness. I work at Measure Lab. I'm head of engineering and technology. I think I may have been a couple of time guest on the Measure Pod in the past. I can't remember now. At least two. I've done at least two guest spots, so I feel I'm perfectly qualified for this auspicious occasion.
I think the reason you're slightly confused is I think one of those you maybe had a few beers. I think your most recent visit
three
was
then.
when you weren't counting that one. Okay.
No, I forgot about that one, but for the reason you just mentioned, it was a super week, and it was about 1 a.m. I think that was recorded, and I might have had a couple of beers by that point. Yeah.
So you've been on 2 episodes making some sense, and then probably 1 episode making not a lot of sense.
Well, it's for the audience to decide if I make sense in any of them, but yeah.
Okay, well, listen, we maybe will give a little teaser of what's going to come in a kind of typical episode now in the new format. It's not, there's no point over egging this. It's not going to be vastly different from what we've done before because we have a formula that works pretty well. It's obviously going to be talking about analytics and data. Sometimes we'll have guests, sometimes we won't. And we're going to include some kind of industry news or news to do with Measure Lab or upcoming conferences that we're going to be at. And then we'll tend to have an interview or a topic where we'll dedicate the bulk of the episode to talking through that topic, maybe having a few healthy debates along the way. I'll probably just disagree with everything you say without actually being able to back it up in any way.
That's the modern world. Post-truth.
Okay, so the news is the topic today, so we might as well just dive straight in. And this is all of the announcements. We won't probably cover all of them because we don't, unless we've got. I mean, I'm thinking this will be about 4.5 hours long, this episode. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, this is for. I know I mentioned it very briefly at the start of the call, but we're talking about Google Next 25 here, which was on. What was it? The 9th, 10th, and 11th of April.
Yeah.
In Las Vegas.
Yeah. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday last week. Slightly confusing because it was live at that time, but because we were watching it remotely, we were waiting till the next day each day to get the on-demand content. So it was, well, at least it confuses my small brain when.
Well, it did look like they were having sessions at 2 a.m. in the morning. So I was a bit
maybe they were
as well, to be honest. But maybe they are hard workers over in the US.
Nipped off to the casino in the breaks just to play a bit of blackjack. Then back to it.
I think the Killers played.
What at Next 25?
The Killers were the big special evening guests at Next 25 in the Las Vegas sphere. So there you go.
Wow, they should have got them on. They should have got them on the stage and asked them their thoughts about the latest agentic updates.
Yeah, it couldn't have been worse. I don't know how many you watched. I got through quite a few, but the thing with these tech conferences is they have some of the most awkward wooden presenters for these talks, and
What,
like
like
they
us, you
try and
mean?
have this like us, yeah, try sort of pretend banter back and forth and awkwardness and some jokes they've just written on some napkins, but it was pretty awkward. So maybe the
Yeah,
killers would have done a better job.
yeah, maybe. Although what I did like about it was because every now and again, it's hard enough to keep at least I find it's hard enough to keep my focus because some of it went over my head and then I'd start to tune out a little bit, or some of it was just a little bit, at times a little repetitive when you're hearing about the same updates over and over again. So when one of them, so some of the presenters, they had this like real, like, big energy. So they'd come out and be like, "Hey, give me a woo," or something like that. And it would kind of like wake me back up again. So I did kind of appreciate the kind of slightly different styles of some of the presenters because it kept me focused.
Or just being like, what?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
there was one person, I should have written down some names, but who did an escalate, pretended to be on an escalator
I
to one
saw that.
computer and then came back up in a lift at the other computer. That woke me up just from confusion, really. It's like, what the hell are you doing? But
Yeah,
it worked.
yeah. That was an interesting one. Yeah, yeah. Um, all right, so we've got a lot to cover. So do we want to do a bit of a broad kind of pick out some of the kind of overall highlights, or do we actually just want to drill straight into the kind of areas that are a little bit more relevant to like what we do at Measure Lab in terms of kind of data analytics, BigQuery updates?
Maybe we just fly through a couple of headlines because there was two keynotes, if I'm not mistaken. There was the keynote, and then there was the developer keynote. So in the main keynote, there was stuff that was big and impressive and potentially affecting our sector, but not necessarily exactly bang on the money, like the developer keynote and a lot of the other talks after that, which were all BigQuery based and agentic. I'd love to have got a count for how many times that was said, but I should have done that before we started.
You could build an agent to do that.
I could
That's
build an
terrible.
agent. If they would give me access to agent space, I've asked them about 6 times and I don't seem to have managed to get into it yet.
Yeah, I thought it was just me, but I'm glad I'm not the only one outside the club, desperately waiting to get in.
Yeah, and they're just looking at the rope, seeing all the good looking people go in while we hang around the bins.
With the wrong shoes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can chuck out some very quick headlines and then you tell me anything I've missed. This is more like on the keynote thing.
Yeah.
So 75 billion CapEx spend for next year, which struck my ear. That's an absolute huge amount of money on
It's a
cloud
few
and AI
quid.
that they're spending. Yeah. And I think that's pretty similar for most of these tech firms. I'm sure I saw some article recently. I've been doing really good at just sourcing random things that I can't remember or vaguely remember reading recently. But yeah, there's a lot of big spend going on. They are really going heavy in on cloud and particularly AI and agents. Not that shocking. They announced this new Ironwood TPU, tensor processing unit, which is what they've been using to underpin a load of their. It's like a Google made tensor processing unit that underpins a load of their tech. And as we all know, that is 42.5 exaflops.
I mean, I knew. Yeah.
Whatever that means. But yeah, they're rolling that new architecture. I just found this interesting. I've never heard this as a metric or a measure before. I think they were comparing Gemini 2.5 or 2.5 Lite to GPT-4o, and they said it was 25 times more intelligence per dollar. Just thought that was an interesting brand new made up metric, intelligence per dollar.
Yeah. I mean, how do they break that down? Yeah, that's not maybe.
Let's just move on.
It's just a number. Yeah.
And then agent kit. So
Yeah.
they talk quite a lot about agent kit and this ability for agents to talk to agents and the support of MCPs, which is like model context per model
Protocol, model context protocol.
Thank you. Agent space, which we've kind of just alluded to, and then just an absolute pile of BigQuery stuff is what I kind of had as the overall headlines. I don't know if I missed anything there.
Well, there was a few other things. I mean, there's probably lots of other things, but there's a few other ones that I thought they didn't necessarily. Some of them you think I can see why that would be a big thing, but it doesn't. Like it's not immediately relevant to us. So like the wide area network WAN, is that right? So Google are opening up their own network that they have that that they use for services like Gmail and Photos. So this ultra low latency high speed network that they use, they're opening that up to enterprises. Um, Sounds interesting. I mean, I have no idea what kind of enterprises that would be applicable to. I assume it's going to be costly. It's probably very large enterprises only. But I thought that was vaguely interesting.
Sounds impressive.
Yes.
Sounds impressive.
Sounds impressive. Yeah. And on a kind of similar or in a similar vein, the kind of on-prem solution, their partnership with NVIDIA. So if you're in a kind of very, what's the word, where you need like high security, like in banking or, yeah. So if you need to have airlocked, am I saying the right things here? You airlocked, should have something to do with airlock.
Yeah, I think yes, I think so. But you got to kind of keep it you got to keep it airtight from the outside internet. You can't have any sort of interference, and
So that I guess the reason that piqued my interest, or at least I paid attention to it, is like that along with these are maybe slightly disconnected, but I felt like there was a bit of a theme where in the past, at least the impression I had was like Google almost went about thinking, well, we're going to do things our way. We don't necessarily have to be open source, or we don't necessarily have to provide you with, on-prem solutions or anything. It's like it's in the cloud. That's it. And I got the sense from this that there's actually a lot more focus now on kind of, collaboration, also allowing people to do their own thing a little bit more. That seemed to be a bit of a theme running through the whole thing, I thought, rather than just this is our way and you have to adopt that or, do something else.
which I feel like that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from Microsoft recently. Like with I think Copilot recently, the coding assistant, Microsoft locked that down a lot and made it only available in like Visual Studio Code and stuff like this. Whereas the theme throughout this, like we may touch on some of the AI stuff later, but the model garden and being able to use like Claude and Meta and all these different models in the platform, being able to have like on-prem versions of, I don't know how you have an on-prem version of cloud, but that's probably just semantics.
It's just a very small cloud.
Yeah, it's just a tiny little cloud in a server room. It definitely felt like, and they talked a lot about sort of cross-cloud collaboration and networks and security, and just being able to have a specific, say, marketing warehouse or a whatever warehouse, a different set of data sitting away from everything else that may be sitting in AWS or Snowflake, and try and foster that collaboration and that movement of data around. Because as far as they're concerned, I suppose, if someone's really embedded in another platform, if they can't get them to migrate over, then they may as well try and empower the marketing teams to build their own little solution over the fence, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's it. Exactly. It's opening it up to a lot more, I guess, individual users, but businesses and business users. It was definitely running through the whole thing. They're trying to make everything easier. They're trying to make it more accessible. The agent-to-agent protocol as well, kind of driving this like multi-agent, multi-environment. It doesn't matter what tech you're using or what frameworks you're using. You're going to be able to build agents that are going to communicate with each other. So it's in terms of where you store your data, where you access your data from, what agents you're building. It's trying to kind of push towards this, I guess, version of things where it doesn't really matter, and you can store your data one place and then use Google technology to do something else. I'm just saying things now, just throwing out words. Interoperability, that was another word they keep talking about.
Synergy.
Yeah,
but they just have the might. They have the might of this technology, of this cloud technology, their experience with artificial intelligence, their this fantastic platform in BigQuery. I suppose for them, making it open source and giving people more opportunities to bring more things onto that platform is a no-brainer. They don't necessarily have to worry too much about building some all singing, all dancing separate product. They can just flex their Google muscle. They definitely seem to have caught up in the AI race quite a lot. there's a lot of leaderboards recently, which you wouldn't have thought maybe 18 months ago.
No, you wouldn't have. It's remarkable, isn't it? I think people were starting to fear they'd been left behind, and underestimate Google at your peril. I think that's probably the key
It's
point
always
there.
been the lesson.
Yeah, exactly.
As
Yeah.
my tattoo says.
Yeah. Before we are inevitably going to lead towards kind of BigQuery and how AI is and Gemini is in BigQuery. But just a couple of other things that I picked up on but don't know a great deal about. The new Firebase studio sounded to me like it's their kind of vibe coding environment, just to throw out yet another buzzword. Is that, I watched parts of the video of the guy introducing it, but I didn't watch the whole thing. But it's like you get your interface and you can use natural language to basically build apps within Firebase.
Yeah, that's the vibe I got as well. They have got another. I don't know if you describe this as vibe coding. Maybe you would. This Gemini Code Assist Kanban thing, which is in a similar space, which maybe we can touch on a bit later. But the Firebase thing, that's what I understood it to be as well. Yeah, just sort of natural language building on that existing Firebase framework for application development.
And Gemini is just in everything. I mean, every single thing they talked about, Gemini is the common denominator, isn't it?
I can't remember seeing many demos they did where at some point they didn't interact with Gemini in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I was watching most of the sort of BigQuery data ones, but it did feel like they were talking about it from security, talking about it from IAM's perspective, talking about it from costs, talking about it from database management, talking about it from data. It is literally absolutely everywhere.
So I was going to just talk about Vertex AI and the different kind of multimodal, the fact they say now they're the only one that does text, video, no, what is it? Video, images, text to audio and audio clips. I don't know. The difference between Chirp and the other one is a bit blurry. Chirp is one of them, and then Lyria, Lyria is the audio one.
Right.
But my only experience, I tried all of these because I thought, well, why not? This is kind of a fun.
Well, those are videos.
I'll create some silly videos. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I don't think this has been fully, because the version that was demoed isn't the version that I've got access to. Like, it was restricted in some ways. I couldn't upload an image to then create a video from that image. It wouldn't allow me to do that. I obviously tried to upload my own voice as well to create an AI version of myself. I mean, why wouldn't
just in time for this podcast?
Just in time. Maybe this is it. But that didn't work for me either. But anyway, in theory, at least, they've got all these upgraded multimodal models.
That is one of the frustrating things with Next. Is like, especially now, like, there's so much cool stuff. You're like, ooh. You kind of jump over to Google Cloud just to go and have a quick play with it and realize that it's not there.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of vague coming soons at the bottom, a lot of their decks describing these tools. So it's like, I really want to have a play with that, but I can't get hold of it. Then who knows when it will eventually appear.
Yeah, or how you get early access to it. I find it really confusing as well. Some of the things they're talking about are obviously, some of them are even already existing features, but they're enhancing them. And then you don't know if you've got the original version or the enhanced one. And then some of them are brand new, and whether you have access to them or not. And then sometimes they do like a gradual release, and other times they just say this is available now. So it's a little confusing. Another one that I went to look at, which I guess we will talk about, is the where you can build an app from a BigQuery notebook.
Yeah,
no, I didn't have. I couldn't. I thought they said that was available, and I couldn't see it.
No, I think I did the same thing. I don't think I could see it either. And I know we do have like the previews and stuff turned on. And we are partners, so we do sometimes get early access to some of these things. But I didn't see it. We'll see.
We just have
see
to wait
when these things appear. Like, just sit on the agent space waiting list forever. While people play, and I sit on the outside.
Okay, so let's move the focus onto BigQuery then, and there's a lot to cover here, isn't there?
No, yeah,
there's a couple of things.
I think we were both saying before we started today, like, we kind of had this intention of looking much broader across things and maybe understanding things that may be a little bit more periphery on data and some of the stuff that's going on elsewhere in the platform. But it was more than enough to even get through and watch just on the BigQuery announcements alone, without thinking about anything else, without even really necessarily thinking about all the stuff that's in Vertex AI and the agent space and all that stuff. So a lot.
So one, if I can maybe tee things off or set this up with a kind of I guess it's a question, or I'll turn it into a question at least. I saw this phrase. I don't think it came up in some of the videos, but it was there was an article published by somebody at Google, kind of closely after one of the big query talks, I guess, and they're using this phrase, autonomous data to AI platform. So BigQuery is not just BigQuery anymore. It's now this autonomous data to AI platform.
Complete rebrand.
Yeah.
Yeah. They I think they kept on the one I watched earlier. That was the tagline at the very beginning. Like BigQuery, the autonomous data AI platform. It's not very catchy.
No.
And I was going to ask you the same thing. Like, what does that mean? Because it is a bit techie and business speaky, but it definitely, I think it speaks to just how many different agents, how many different sort of autonomous behind the scenes systems and easy, accessible point and click solutions they've put in there, stuffed into BigQuery now to try and make it as simple to get to activation. But I suppose that our version of that activation being AI, LLMs, quizzing the data, getting insights in that way, like with the conversational analytics agent they mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to be, I don't know what to call myself, naive. I'm wondering whether to be kind to myself or mean, but let's just say I'm naive and maybe a bit optimistic. But I watched some of the demos and I thought, wow, this, like, basically you just don't need to have any actual coding skills anymore. You just, you go into BigQuery, open up a canvas or something. Yeah. And you can use all these specialized agents to do the heavy lifting for you. And obviously the demos are rehearsed and they've got things lined up and they've got their prompts,
Copy and
finely
paste
tuned copy. But yeah, there was some very kind of packed clipboards I noticed. It's like, let me just right click and add something from my clipboard. And it's this perfect prompt that they'd probably spent hours fine tuning. But it really looked like with these agents that you can now like end to end. So they can, it'll make suggestions on how you might want to clean up the data that you've got. And then right the way through to actually, helping you create pipelines and then actually analyzing the data. At one point in one of the demos, the guy didn't even ask it to do this and it just went off and used the data science agent.
Yeah, I think I saw that. It was in Canvas, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was started creating new visualizations and new SQL queries and Python scripts and stuff. I think that's what they would like us to think, and I think that's the intention. They've got all the GA4 data, and they're connecting up all these other sources. Thinking about it from a marketing analytics perspective, anyway, going into BigQuery, they want this to be the centralized hub of data that you then manipulate and build and create all of these great tools off. So to do that, you have to make it as accessible as possible, and all of these tools do that. So just to label some of the tools you were talking about there, we had like the data engineering assistant, which looked to sort of help you build out transformation pipelines and sort of get the data into shape and join things and do all those kinds of stuff. You had the data science agent, which was around data exploration, cleaning, analysis, getting it into the right format, for want of a better word. And then the conversational analytics, which I guess is on the other side of this whole thing. My gut reaction is it's all cool and it's all very powerful, and it's going to put data into a lot more people's hands, and suddenly a lot more people are going to have access to stuff. But if you don't have a strong foundation of the data in there in the first place, you haven't got robust pipelines coming from your siloed sources into the warehouse, if you haven't got robust repeatable models and all these sorts of things, you're going to end up just using all these cool tools built on top of crap data. And that's going to lead to a lot of problems. So yeah, they're cool. And yeah, they could be really powerful. But to me, they didn't mention a huge amount about that bit, the fundamentals of getting the data in there and making sure it's robust and accurate.
Well, I was really curious about that as well, because some of the stuff, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, at least from my kind of perspective, you will have taken a lot more in than I did, but I was watching some of it thinking, wow, this is really thin. I want them to kind of go deeper on this. And then other times I'd be thinking, wow, this is way too technical for me. But there were a couple of things mentioned that there wasn't a huge amount of detail on. Like, they talked about this governance layer. I don't know if that's the right, I can't remember if that was exactly how it was termed, but there wasn't really much about it. And they also did talk about how and they did show this in some of the examples, but like the data engineering agent can make suggestions about cleaning up the format of your data. But I guess that's only going to take it so far. What I didn't know, and a question I was going to ask you to get your take on, is like, did you see anything that suggested that it would actually be a really meaningful help to you as a, say you're a business and you've got your data and it is a little messy and you do have issues. Will any of what you've seen actually help to get better data in the first place? Because it seemed like they were suggesting that, but there wasn't a great deal of kind of meat on the bone in terms of how far you could take it, as opposed to just, oh, this form or this column doesn't have a clear name. You could maybe rename it, or these dates are differently formatted. Let's clean them up for you. Almost like the suggestions you get in Excel. But like, is it actually going to help you, you know, if your data is really bad in the first place, is this going to help, or is it just going to make the problem worse potentially?
Yeah, I think it depends on the problems that are in the data. But if been saying recently that data engineers' job has historically been just putting out fires, like crap just gets sent into a centralized place, and then the job is just to go like, right, how do I fix all of the problems and issues that are in this data and get it into a shape that is of some use to be able to be used for whatever it's going to be used for. Um, so I think that there's still going to be those instances where rubbish data comes in, and maybe I'm going off on a tangent here. Maybe all of the vibe coding and people making their own applications and their own data sources is going to exacerbate that problem, and even more unstructured, messy data is going to be made available. As it's only going to be an increase in that stuff. So I think I agree. I don't think I saw anything of substance to fix those kinds of problems. And I think you would still need. It's like with anything, you can augment yourself with this stuff as a professional, and you should, in my opinion. I wouldn't bury your head in the sand or dismiss it and go, "Nah, it's a lot of crap. I can do it myself in a couple of hours." I think they are useful if you augment yourself and use it as part of your processes to begin to clean up and get data into shape, and not necessarily just completely lean on them just to autonomously do it, which I think some people may, because they won't have those underlying skills. I'm not sure if I answered your question then, or if I just went off on a random rant.
No, you did, and I guess these things are on it's a little bit of a spectrum as well, because I just started thinking about, like, if someone's limited in terms of their own skills, or if it's a company and they're limited in terms of their resources. Well, if some of these tools kind of allow them to inch themselves forward, like, if maybe is a kind of, maybe isn't quite the right thing to say, but I kind of think if someone's got bad data anyway, then if they can make it slightly less bad, then at least they're taking a step forward. So if some of these tools, like, you're right, obviously you don't just want to, like, nobody should want to just press a button and then trust what comes out at the end without having any layer of kind of validation on that, or without knowing what happened between the time you press the button and you then using the output. But if you do use these tools, if you don't have the resources to take all of this stuff really seriously and do everything according to best practice, then it might help you get a better understanding of that data and where the problems are, and then gradually, almost like, I don't know, again, maybe this is slightly idealistic of me, but I kind of think if you're someone who's a bit of a jack of all trades, even in a company where you're the data person, you could at least use these tools to kind of plug some of your own gaps where maybe you don't have the skills to do, full data engineering, but you know enough about what you're doing with the data, and you kind of use this. I guess that is augmentation, really, isn't it? That is what we're talking about.
Yeah, but you're right. There's no point to just sort of go, well, if we can't get it 100% right, then we'll just
Don't
never
bother.
use it and
Yeah, yeah.
don't bother. They're certainly for like smaller companies. I think I'd always advise to a smaller company, just start to build, when you start getting the data in there, just do it with good foundations. And at least then, if you find problems and fixes and you want to reshape things, you've got good foundations that you can adapt and build from. And then you can explore these tools and go down blind alleys and go down dead ends and come back to the start and figure and evolve and grow and mature with it. If you just, if you just chuck data in and just hope for the best and start making big old decisions based off it, maybe that's not the greatest idea. Like, part of it is, I, I don't want to. I'm also wary of labeling entire professions that I don't know masses about, but like the conversational analytics stuff looked really impressive if it worked. If it works the way it works, because you can imagine at that point you've got the data in, you've got the data transformed and cleaned and in a shape, and you kind of are putting a chat interface into everybody's hands to kind of make the answering of very specific questions available to the masses, rather than having to build out specific single little dashboards to try and cover broad questions and answers. That looked cool, but then again, I'm not deeply into visualization and data science,
Yeah, of
but I thought
course.
that looked cool.
Yeah, I did too, and I guess the more you build up so I don't know. Again, I might be getting the wrong end of the stick here, but is this where knowledge engine plays a part as well in terms of building up that context? Does that work with the conversational analytics, or is that something different?
Well,
Because
I think, sorry, I think what I took the knowledge engine to mean, so this is BigQuery knowledge engine, was that it understood your whole data ecosystem within BigQuery, and then it was able to sort of augment all of the various agents within BigQuery to kind of get it to make better decisions when it's writing code for you. So I suppose if you're in the data engineering assistant, it has an understanding of the various layout of your data, lineages, schemas, metadata, etc., and can make a better decision on how it writes that code to get better answers. That's what I took that to mean. And I think part of that would obviously bleed into the conversational analytics thing as well. But I think it also is in the marketing data scientist agent
yeah,
and the data engineering agent.
yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right, and also the thing I just remembered that it does is it also, because it's using Gemini. Surprise, surprise. It's got the search, so it not only knows your data, but it can do the advanced reasoning that Gemini can do, and it can access live information. So one of the examples in the demo was something like, can you categorize this data into, I can't remember what it was, but it was like some established like industry norm for customer segments or something like that. And you didn't in the prompt have to explain what they were, because it obviously used the
Yeah.
model to actually figure out what that was. So it can kind of mix together your data and then use its reasoning and potentially pull in information from, I guess, live information from the internet as well,
Yeah.
which is
It's like
pretty
is
powerful.
it grounding? They call it grounding.
Yeah,
Grounding with Google search and being able to take it outside of that.
check things.
What Yeah, because they're all trained up to like 23 or something, aren't they, after these models? But to get something more recent and not some old code base or whatever. There was also, I just wrapping up this agent thing, I suppose. There look to be like inside of BigQuery notebooks. So these are the Python call out, no, Python notebooks that sit inside of BigQuery. There look to be a load of new updates in there in terms of Gemini, where it just had like a little chat bar at the bottom, and you could just be sort of typing away, and they'd just be populating all of the cells. Similarly in Canvas, I think is just like a visual layer on top of in top of a notebook, but you could again just be typing away. I think you talked about it earlier, and it just started spinning off and creating
It looked amazing.
visualizations and things. Yeah, and there was the data preparation thing, which I actually had to play with earlier. That does exist. I don't know if it already existed before the conference or not, but that is like there used to be something called data prep, which was owned by a company called Trifecta or something like that. That was in Google Cloud, but like a paid for additional service. I got very heavy data prep vibes from it. So I wonder if they just gobbled that up into BigQuery, put a lot of AI on it, and yeah, you could put those suggestions forward of like, yeah, there's too many nulls here, or this is wrong, or filter out to get rid of that, or join this together, and you can kind of schedule that and have transformations. That looks pretty interesting and cool as well.
Yeah. One of the one of the one of the points about this, we said, very catchy autonomous data to AI platform. One of the points that they were kind of calling out was that they're making, quote unquote, they're making unstructured data a first party citizen, which sounded great. You know, I'm all for
Yeah,
equality, like it's, it's about time unstructured data got the respect it deserves.
nobody
Um,
puts unstructured data in a corner.
exactly. But I didn't fully. I mean, I don't know if you got a chance to look much into that, but one bit of a demo I did see was where um, she was basically accessing. It looked really cool. So she was accessing like normal kind of table data, but then also PDFs from, I think, a sales system or something. And she was able to merge the two together and then get it to extract information out of the PDF. And she was doing this all in, I think maybe it was Canvas or it was just in regular
Yeah, there was.
BigQuery. I'm not sure. Can't remember
I
now.
think this is, and I might be wrong. I've got like so many just headlines written
Yeah,
down
same. Yeah.
of like whatever they've named a thing. But there was something they announced called BigQuery multimodal tables, which allows you to have structured and unstructured data within the same table. Which sounds like what you're describing there, where you could show. Yeah, I think I remember seeing it like images, text. It was all just in this one table, which I guess is very useful for multimodal AIs to make use of because they don't have to just deal with structured data. They can also understand what's inside of an image. They can understand what's inside an audio clip, what's inside a PDF. So yeah, that did look. It all looked fairly substantial.
Yeah, and again, it all looks so easy when they show you in the demo, but like, is that going to depend on what information you've got in the PDFs, and then if you start mixing like a different, let's say it's the same, let's say it's an invoice or something, but you used to have a different format of invoice, is that going to mess it up? Like how safe are these things going to be to use, or because they'll have just taken, as you would with a demo, you're going to check in advance and make sure, okay, that information is in that PDF. These PDFs do work. It's not going to come up with some random error when I try and merge these two different data sets together.
God knows. I'd look. There's so much stuff that released in BigQuery on a regular basis, plus the stuff you have to just do on a daily basis as a job. It's hard sometimes to get in and get stuck in and explore it all. And I think that this time in particular, I don't necessarily remember there being this much around BigQuery before. I might be wrong, but it does feel like they went all in this time on BigQuery. So God, we'll find out if it's safe or not in 2 years' time when we finally get around to looking at it, and
It's all
completely
complete,
irrelevant.
yeah. But it makes sense given what you were saying earlier, like them really gone to town on BigQuery. It's like that. It does feel a little bit like that's at the center of it all in a way, doesn't it? It's like that's the kind of linchpin, and it doesn't actually matter, the whole thing again about it being multi-cloud and all the rest of it. It doesn't really matter, does it? It's like that this is the thing that's going to get you, because they said something like, and they were being really kind of vague about it, but it's obvious, isn't it? But they said that BigQuery's got 5 times the number of customers than, and they just said the other two leading.
Yeah, I found that confusing because I was thinking like AWS presumably is bigger.
But yeah, so they said data. What did
of
they say? Like
BigQuery.
data warehouse only or something. So I thought maybe they're not
Right.
including very like specific wording. So it's probably these two
Yes.
random kind of competitors that aren't the ones people would think of. But anyway,
Yeah.
the point I guess is that they do seem this is like a key area for them, isn't it? To get people. So putting Gemini into the middle of it and allowing you to, you know, mix different formats and all the rest of it. Like it seems like a bit of a no brainer, doesn't it?
It's that's why I think that's why they've got such a big advantage, especially from an enterprise perspective. Like for so many, I mean, when did ChatGPT 3.5 come out? Like 2.5 years ago, something like that, 3 years ago. And it's all very much trained on whatever data, and you just kind of tap away, black box of data. It would give you answers. And what Google seemed to be really pushing at is to just to get enterprises, encourage enterprises to stuff their data into these models and activate their data with these models. I think that's half of what the on-prem firewall, airlocked, whatever we called it, stuff is about, for them to be able to pump data into their own hosted models, the model garden, being able to host your own version of Claude Sonnet in the same place your app's being deployed, and having just betting big that BigQuery is the center of all of this, because that you can't date AI, LLMs, ML modeling is all completely useless without data. So they have the best. Well, I might be biased here as somebody who uses BigQuery on a regular basis, but they have one of the best, if not the best, data platform around in terms of data warehouses.
Presumably, I only just thought about this now, but presumably all the, you know, to my untrained eye, I could look at all the stuff they're doing with like the agent space and the, you know, agent development kit and all that stuff, and think, oh, well, that's very separate. But I guess it isn't, because all of that, if you're building agents with in agent space, and it's all using your business data, all of that sitting in BigQuery,
Yeah,
and then you've got
all of
Gemini
the
running through the whole thing.
yeah, all of the stuff in like the agent builder, the agent space, the the enterprise tooling and automations that you build can all be based off of your hub. I keep having to look at my page to remember what the hell they called it again. Autonomous data AI hoodoo. Um, yeah, it's all based off that data, and joining structured, unstructured, and getting data into clean. It all makes sense. It's almost like they know what they're doing over there.
You'd
Um,
think so, wouldn't you?
yeah, there's a couple of other things as well that just popped into my head that we haven't mentioned, which was the BigQuery vector search. You see that?
Yeah, yeah.
For vector search, I believe it can identify like where there's similarities in the data or duplication and things like that. That's what I took from it, is kind of being able to scan across the entirety of your BigQuery data and identify things. I suppose vectors, for people who aren't familiar, are used heavily in AI and as in RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So pulling out embeddings and vectors to ground responses from LLMs in some sort of data source, some sort of reality. So maybe you can imagine having some sort of agent looking at all of your data and using vector search across the whole thing. I don't know, but pretty cool. And then the other one is my last one, maybe, um, was the continuous queries.
Oh,
Um,
I don't think I saw anything about that one.
so this came out a little while ago, but they mentioned it again. I don't know if they've updated it or they've sellotaped Gemini to the side of it. But it's the idea of having BigQuery be a real time data source as well. So it can ingest data in real time, but it can also undertake transformations and modeling on that data in real time to then be providing insights in real time to people for reporting or for ML or for whatever. A lot of you used to be able to, well, you still can do this stuff with like data flow, where you'll be sending data through and transforming it, and there'll be like a real time pipeline of getting that stuff through. But you can do that in BigQuery now with this BigQuery continuous queries trademark.
All
Um,
such catchy names, aren't they?
yeah, they all started BigQuery as well, which weirdly.
Yeah, maybe they could
Um,
just drop that at some point. When everything is
yeah,
BigQuery, they can just drop that.
yeah. When every shop on the high street and every assistant in your home is BigQuery. I think that was it. I mean, we talked about BigQuery governance as well, didn't we? That seems to be metadata generation was quite interesting. Annoying because I just built an app that did metadata data generation and column name descriptions and stuff like that. But it seems that they've nicked that idea.
This is always very Google. Don't ever build any apps for like
No,
improving any Google existing
don't ever
tools.
improve.
Yeah,
Don't try.
don't try. Just don't try. Just don't try.
Yeah,
It's the moral of the story.
that's the message of the podcast for the day. Yeah, yeah. I think that almost certainly we've missed. But have you got anything that we might have missed on the BigQuery side?
And I did have something I just when you ask somebody if there's anything else, that's when they forget it. So that's what's
Yeah.
to me. So it might come back in a second, but I did want to ask you about the meta what did you call it? Auto meta data generation, is that what you
Yeah,
call it?
yeah.
BigQuery TM. Is that another area though where is that going to depend on the quality of that? Like how good a job's that going to do? Are we back to the same issue of if you don't have good quality data, then it's basically going to make the wrong inferences and it's going to generate the wrong metadata?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, the one that we created at Measure Lab, like looked at say five random rows of a data set, the column titles and things like that, and it would take a guess at what was in that column, write a column description, um, and importantly have a human in the loop to say like, this is what I think it is. Are you happy with this? Do you want to sort of validate it before it would then go and write it into BigQuery? I didn't see a huge amount of. I suppose there is human in the loop in terms of you having a conversation, but like you said, it just went off and started doing things at
Yeah.
that point. Didn't feel like there was a huge amount of humans in the loop there. So I guess it all depends on if it's just going and doing it, or if it has got that kind of, you have thought about those checks, cross checks and stuff. Because I mean, some of this, we joke about it going off and doing its own thing, but on an enterprise data set, like how do you make sure it doesn't, I don't know, query some raw data and start doing some gnarly stuff on it, and you rack up a 15 grand
Massive cost, yeah.
bill? And I assume there's firewalls, but they didn't really talk about them as far as I remember.
No, I guess that doesn't sit.
It's not,
That
it's
doesn't
not rock and roll,
excite
is
in
it?
a yeah. That just follows in the detail
Yeah.
afterwards, doesn't it?
That was the 2 a.m. sessions, just a lot of nerds talking about their cost firewalls.
Yeah, yeah. But all of that, kind of taking that even a step further, like the with the agents, like when people end up building these kind of multi-agent systems and they're truly, because I think is a fair. This is something I picked up in one of the talks as well. It's like they were saying about how like agents at the moment they're almost like slightly glorified assistants. They're not really being that proactive, but the idea for them in the future is that they will be kind of, they'll move to semi-autonomous and then they'll be fully autonomous and they'll go away and they'll figure things out and they'll update based on new context and new information. So how complicated and scary is that going to be when your business has these multi-agent systems going off and activating, and you don't necessarily know what's happening? You're basically handing the keys over to AI.
Yeah, maybe no one. Maybe it's just convincing people that everybody else is doing that to force it, just to give you a fear of missing out, and everyone just runs and
We'll
starts
just do it. Yeah.
shipping automated data at things, and Google makes tons and tons of money. You hope. I mean, we're not, like you say, half the stuff is coming soon or not out yet. You hope and think probably there are checks and balances and things you can do to make sure it doesn't go crazy. Like with the conversational analytics, for example, I had to play with it earlier because you can add agents that exists. Conversational analytics, you can add agents in that, and you can specify the tables that it has access to and give it instructions and tell it what's in each different field and things. So, but like you said, people could just be randomly playing with it, and there might be too much assumption of people thinking things through and doing best practice, and people are going to come a cropper when they don't do that and just start pointing it at big old data sets. But maybe that's true now before AI. I'm sure there's
Probably.
plenty of examples of some wet behind the ears analyst querying the wrong table and costing the company a fortune. I can see that now. So just maybe a lot easier to do it in the world of agents and
Yeah,
AI.
but then again, if there is kind of cost controls and, if there's kind of layers in there to kind of protect against that, then you'd hope that that would, because a lot of these that would, there was talk about it's like some of these agents, some of the focus on these agents is already around not just kind of cost optimization, but some of them are around security as well. So it's like you could have agents that actually check. So you could even have an agent, this is getting very meta, but you could have an agent that checks what the other, a supervisor agent that's checking what the other agents are doing and then alerting somebody if, like the agent police.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that is like a genuine theory that they're trying to put in place for like these big agents that they're scared are going to become sentient, like an agent to check that it's knock it on the head with a wooden spoon if it starts to become sentient.
Behave yourself.
Stop it. um, yeah, it's all. I think that to me, the whole thing is massive and fascinating and in places scary, but it reiterated for me and highlighted for me how much a growing need there is to get good, robust data into these places. And that's a real opportunity for people like us and other people to help people get that data into the right shape so they can take advantage of all these new tools that Google are chucking out left, right, and center. So it's reassuring in a way that all of this stuff, all of these announcements will be better with better data. I'm excited and optimistic I think.
Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah. I think I am too. And I did remember the question I was going to ask you, which wasn't it wasn't about something that you'd miss, but it's thinking about this like vector search and knowledge engine, and the fact that now you can have a mixture of structured and unstructured and all different modalities and whatever. Um, it made me, then maybe this is a naive question, but my thinking would have been up to this point that businesses would usually use BigQuery for, tabular data, and that would have been the main focus. You wouldn't necessarily, although I'm sure there are lots of businesses that probably do this, but you wouldn't have all of your assets you wouldn't have like images and video files and text files. You wouldn't have all of that information stored in Google Cloud Storage necessarily. But now there's going to be more and more of a reason to have all of your business assets potentially, unless I'm misunderstanding this, but if you have everything in Google Cloud Storage and you can access all of that information through BigQuery, and then on the Gen AI side, you can output anything you want in all of the different I'm saying modality. Am I just making up words?
It sounds really good. Keep saying it.
I'll keep saying it, whether it's right or not. So you could query, it opens up the possibilities of, you could do some analysis there and then saying, identify the customer types that have the highest average order value and profile them into a customer segment, and then allow me to create a custom ad campaign using the right assets that, basically you could create a custom campaign and target people and activate all of that. I'm not saying you can do all of this now necessarily. Maybe you can, but certainly that's going to become a lot more commonplace. So there's reasons to have more and more of your business data.
Yeah,
which again is it works out great for Google, doesn't it?
For Google, yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, like it used to be that you'd have you'd maybe cloud storage would be a middle point before it went off into BigQuery. Maybe you'd have that be where you dump all of your raw data and then you have your transformation layer. But then recently, particularly with semi-structured or structured data, you'd be dumping all that into BigQuery straight away and then using a data form to transform it and just use the power of BigQuery. And it almost feels like that a little bit for unstructured. It's like, chuck your unstructured data in there. Just chuck whatever. Chuck the bin in. Put the kitchen sink in.
Chuck it all in.
Yeah, BigQuery will sort it out autonomously for you. It'll change it into AI.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I took from Next 25 is just put everything in there and then you can do whatever you want without knowing any code and not worrying about governance or security or anything else. There's no problems. Nothing can ever go wrong. Happy days.
Hey presto, AI.
Yeah.
Pops out the other end of the conveyor belt.
Dear Gemini, make my business better. Thank you. I'm off.
Happy days.
Yeah. Okay. Any kind of final thoughts or I mean, okay, well, here's a question for you which might kind of help you with final thoughts. Like what so as you just said, and I found the same, you watch it, lots of it's really exciting. Some of it's kind of directly relevant and applicable. Other stuff is just, wow, that's kind of cool. That might be useful for something at some point. What are your practical kind of thoughts or either your own or what would you give as advice to somebody who works in the data and analytics space based on these updates? Like what's got you thinking in terms of like actual day to day? What difference is this going to make and how might this change not just your day-to-day job, but somebody working in a company in a data role.
I think I kind of said it before, but I think for sure don't ignore them. I think that it can be a real tendency, whether it's through fear that this is coming for your job or something, and you just want to bury your head in the sand and pretend it's not there, or it's through just you've been doing it for so long and it's like a second nature and you just ignore it. I think that's dangerous, and that could potentially lead to problems down the line if you just completely ignore these things. So just exploring it and just feeling how it can maybe assist you in your day to day. Like look at you, maybe you're a data scientist, an unbelievable data scientist. Maybe using the data scientist agent can save you an hour in your data cleanup process because it can just skip through a few steps and just do some of the really easy, repeatable stuff nice and simply for you. Similarly, if you're engineering and you're doing bits of, I, to be honest, the data engineering one is the one I'm least clear on. Ironically, I wasn't completely sure what it was doing, but it seemed to be able to do some pipeline stuff. Explore it, see what it can do, see how it can make you more efficient. In the first instance, you'd assume it would shift the repetitive and the low hanging and give you the headspace to concentrate on the stuff that really needs the human brain behind it. Um, that's from a person perspective, and I think from a practical perspective, it's just making sure that the data that's going in there is right as much as possible. If you can own and understand the point at which the data is being collected and generated, and ensure that that's correct, whether it's to speak in our cadence, having a proper robust data layer implementation and collection process, so you know by the time the data's hitting BigQuery, it's in at least some half decent shape. That's going to make your life a lot easier, and it's going to make these tools a lot simpler and able to be utilized better, utilized with more efficiency. Um, so yeah, just understanding it all from the far left of the process to the far right, from the generation of the data to the activation of the data. Again, that as robust as possible will make these tools much more useful and much less likely to cause you headaches.
Yeah.
Within my wrap up.
Yeah, good takeaways. Yeah, I think the on your first one around like people fearing it's going to take the jobs or whatever. It's like the phrase that I like is when they talk about toil and like reducing toil, this idea of like this kind of repetitive, kind of boring work, and it's like that's really where it can add the advantage, isn't it? It's like it's not. Let's not get into whether it is or isn't going to take people's jobs, but I think it's like if you can use it to automate and basically just delegate those repetitive, boring tasks that you do. A lot of it, a lot of the examples and the demos they were showing you, what it was doing that, it was just using it to do some of the heavy lifting for you. So you don't have to, you might even have the skills to do that, but that doesn't mean you need to do it each time from scratch, does it? So if you can just offload that, get some of that heavy lifting done. And then, as you said, you focus more on using the what you need, the human brain, your own creativity, your own context, or whatever. You just apply that on top. Then, all right. Well, maybe we'll do a. I think we're probably that feels like a good kind of natural stopping point. Maybe we could go on for probably another 6 hours and still not cover everything. But maybe we do a when the dust settles on some of this stuff and some of it's maybe available to us because some of it is very much like, oh, you will be able to do this, but you can't, not yet. So maybe when we've had a chance to get our hands on some of this stuff, maybe we do a bit more of a deeper dive on some of these individual features or on a group of them. If there's a few that kind of fit nicely together, we could do a bit more of a deep dive.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's tons of exploration to be done, but it feels like a pretty rich vein,
Yeah,
rich vein of content, which is what you want on the podcast. But
absolutely. Yeah,
that's what you need.
this will keep us going for months.
Dying out on this. Yeah.
That's it for this week's episode of the Measure Pod. We hope you enjoyed it and picked up something useful along the way. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you don't miss future episodes.
And if you're enjoying the show, we'd really appreciate it if you left us a quick review. It really helps more people discover the pod and keeps us motivated to bring back more. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.